Hey there, this is Nikki Sands, founder and CEO of Gigs, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music with the guy who seems to know a thing or two himself, Bob Bender.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio today here in Nashville, Tennessee, another episode of Business Side of Music. I have to say that we are going to have a conversation with this gentleman today that probably has to be one of my favorite topics, and that is jazz. Joining us today is Peter Martin, who is an acclaimed jazz pianist, composer, arranger, educator, and entrepreneur. His touring career has taken him numerous times to 6 continents around the world. I don't think there's many more than that, so outside of Antarctica, it sounds like you've covered everything, along with performing at the White House on several occasions. Peter has performed on and arranged Diane Reeves' Grammy-winning release A Little Moonlight and appeared in George Clooney's 2005 film Good Night and Good Luck, as well as being the featured pianist and arranger on the Grammy-winning soundtrack. Peter has also performed, toured, and recorded with the likes of Wynton Marsalis, Chris Bodie, Betty Carter, Christian McBride, and Joshua Redman, as well as the Berlin Philharmonic, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and the New York Philharmonic. Peter attended the Juilliard School of Music and has been on the faculties of, get ready folks, it's a list. He's been on the faculties of Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, Northwestern University, Tulane University, the University of New Orleans, and the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. He has performed workshops and masterclasses at institutions worldwide, including Oberlin College, Duke University, the Carnegie Hall Professional Training Workshops, Steinway Piano Gallery, the Rotterdam Conservatory, and the Royal Scottish Academy of Music in Glasgow. In 2015, after launching a successful educational video podcast, 2 Minute Jazz, Martin founded a revolutionary jazz educational web platform called Open Studio, where students from over 120 countries are part of an active community and are continuing to learn from Martin, along with Diane Reeves, Fred Hirsch, Christian McBride, Greg Hutchinson, Romero Lubambo, and other notable artists. Peter, what a bio. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob. It's great to be here. Yeah, it definitely reminded me of some fun places, as you were naming, fun places that I went. So that was nice. That was a good part of it.
The question I always ask our guests that are on the show, especially the musician types, for lack of better words, how did you get started in the music business, and was piano your first instrument?
I actually started on violin first, but my mother is a violinist. My father's a pianist and violinist, and I really grew up in a musical household. But I think the really early connection was my mother is a Suzuki violin teacher, and so before I was in school, I was always with her because she didn't have anybody to watch me, I guess, a lot of the time. And so she kind of stuck a violin in my hand, and she was teaching the other young kids. And she was very much, and still is, into the Suzuki method, which starts them very young. I mean, I was about 2 or 3 years old, actually, kind of playing or doing something. So it's always kind of been a part of my family, a part of my life. My older sister played piano, so that's what kind of got me interested in it. We always had a piano in the house. My dad played, my mom played, and that became kind of my target at a certain point. Seeing and hearing that instrument, at a certain point, I was like, that's what I want to do. I like violin too, but piano, you can sit down when you play piano. That seemed to be an advantage for sure.
Your musical influences, were you the typical teenager listening to rock and roll, or did you take a different path when it came to discovering artists and influencing you musically?
You know, I definitely listened to a lot of pop music, listening to the radio, coming up hip hop, kind of the beginning of hip hop really becoming on the radio and sort of mainstream was when I was like 11, 12, 13. So I was hearing a lot of that. But I always heard a fair amount of jazz. My dad was a big fan, so he had records, basically. He loved jazz. He still does. But it was like dad music, you know. So I'd hear it in the house, but it wasn't necessarily something I gravitated towards, but it was floating around my psyche. And then I think like just being like a 70s and early 80s kid, it was like watching Mr. Rogers, which had incredible jazz piano playing on it all over it, and like listening to watching Charlie Brown with Vince Guaraldi. Like jazz, I heard it more than I thought, you know. Definitely heard a lot of classical music because my dad played in the symphony in St. Louis where I mostly grew up, and I kind of hung around there a lot. But yeah, just listening to pop stuff. And then at a certain point when I was about 12, 13, something connected with me with hearing jazz, like that was like, I want to do that. I want to figure out what that is first, and then I want to see if I can do that, because I've been playing piano and violin and doing, even playing in the band and stuff. But at a certain point, I was like, I want to do that. And because I did have this great privilege of a music education up to that point, I figured it might be possible. I wasn't starting from like, I want to do that, but I got to find an instrument and a way to play it. I could already play kind of classical stuff and was fairly accomplished for my age or whatever. But it became really exciting when I connected and started going down the rabbit hole of like listening to different records that my dad had and going to the record store. And it was like right around the time CDs were coming out. So a lot of classic jazz records were being re-released, and I was hearing them for the first time. I mean, not as exciting as if I grew up now and you could just put on Spotify and listen to whatever you want, but it was still exciting for sure.
I remember as a kid too, it sounds to me like you and I both went down the same path. My dad was an insurance broker, but he loved jazz, and especially big bands. So Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, Stan Kenton, all of those groups. And I grew up listening to that at night. He would stack the records in the record player, and that's what my sister and I went to sleep to every night. But I slowly discovered the likes of, you know, John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and T. Monk, and then gravitated more towards Weather Report, and found that I had this innate interest in jazz that none of my peers, none of my friends did, because everybody was listening to rock and roll, which I was too. When it comes down to a particular artist, because you play piano, and I've listened to a couple of your cuts, is there a particular artist that kind of made you say to yourself, I want to play piano based on this ability or this style that I heard?
Yeah. Herbie Hancock was really, and continues to be, like just sort of that person for me. Because I remember he did a record called Rocket, and I was about 13 years old when that record came out. He had a big pop hit with that record. Like it was on MTV, and it was on like the pop, was it RB? I don't remember what charts, but I mean, it was like, especially for anybody that was actually a jazz artist, which I didn't know at the time, but it was like, that was a huge thing. I remember having that record, and I was trying to like learn how to scratch on records at the same time too. And my dad was like, what's that? I said, what's that you listen to? I said, oh, it's this guy. You don't know him, Herbie Hancock. My dad was like, oh yeah. He's like, I think I have a record of him playing with Miles Davis from a long time ago. And I was like, really? Are you sure? And I heard My Funny Valentine, Miles Davis, 1963 live at the Philharmonic, and a young Herbie Hancock's playing. And I remember I was like, wow, like I love that record. I still love it. Like that was probably like the thing that I was first consciously like, just really took me aback and was like, wow, you can do that with the piano. And then, I mean, but because I'd heard, Rocket and like Chameleon, because I think we did that in like our middle school jazz band, more of the funk stuff that Herbie did first. That was kind of my entry point, my gateway drug with Herbie. And then I just started going down the rabbit hole of like different Wayne Shorter records he played on. And I just loved everything he played. And it's interesting because that's kind of the way it's been ever since then. I heard him live a couple of months ago for the last time. I've gotten a few chances to hang out with him. I mean, like he was very much somebody that I sat as a kid and like just stared at his albums and listened to the music and transcribed and learned everything. So the first time I got a chance to meet him, it was like, meeting my hero, for somebody that I truly idolized. But yeah, I mean, but then I heard, McCoy Tyner and Art Tatum and Oscar Peterson and Hank Jones, Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, all these different great artists that were sort of not always originally connected to Herbie Hancock, but somehow they went back. Like I heard that Herbie Hancock had listened to Red Garland. I think that's when I started seeking out his records, because he said he was influenced by him or whatever. So then, McCoy Tyner was like somebody I wasn't interested in at first, because they were like, well, there's McCoy and Herbie from the 60s. And I was like, well, I want the records on Blue Note that have Herbie on them. But then I think I heard McCoy. I was like, wow, he sounds really good. And so, it was just fun. You discovering all these different things. And I'm still discovering stuff from some of these artists that I didn't even have been heard, which I'm surprised, which is a fun thing. And it's definitely a journey.
It's interesting that you mention Herbie, because when I listened to your cut, Groove Echo Chamber, I actually thought I was listening to Chick Corea for the first minute or so there, and I thought, this has got Chick Corea stylings all over it. Were you a fan of his? Did you follow him much?
Absolutely. Chick Corea, he was another one. I mean, really, like Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner, in a lot of ways, I would say that's sort of like the trident of my influences, and a lot of pianists around my age, I think our whole generation. I mean, there's no escaping those three, even if you wanted to. And why would you want to? Right. I came to Chick not just a little bit later after Herbie and McCoy, but not much, because you're going to hear about him. And I loved his playing and just kind of ingested all of that as well.
We're going to take a commercial break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors. But as we do, we're going to play a little bit of Groove Echo Chamber.
listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today is Peter Martin, who is an acclaimed jazz pianist, composer, arranger, educator, and entrepreneur. Peter, one of the things I want to talk about before we dig into your album is I want to talk about this program that you have called, I believe it's called Open Studio. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yes. So I started Open Studio about 7 years ago, and it's grown into what is, by all measures that I can see, the #1 online jazz learning community. And it really kind of came out of my desire to share a lot of the experience I had, knowledge that was kind of passed along to me from some of the greats in the music that I got to mentor under when I was young. Wynton Marsalis and Betty Carter, amazing vocalists I got to play in her band when I was young. A number of musicians here in St. Louis, Willie Aikens and others that, kind of, I don't want to say they handed me the secret scrolls because they were so generous, but like it was almost like, especially at that time, if you weren't around someone who knew what they were doing, it was very hard to get kind of the information about how to play outside of directly from the records, which of course is an amazing source as well. But I'd always done some teaching, and I come from a family of educators, music educators, especially my mother. And so I always loved giving back in that way. And I did start thinking at a certain point is like, how can we sort of pass along some of this information to people that want to learn how to play jazz, and they kind of see it as like this sort of mythical castle that there's no way to get in. It's like you can learn how to play classical music. It's hard. There's like books about it. There's schools to go to. But with jazz, it's a little bit more secretive. Not because the musicians are keeping it secretive. It's just, it's so improvisational based. It seems such a high mountain to climb. All the music theory you have to know, or do you really have to know it, or do you learn it a different way? But there's definitely was like an interest and a market for people wanting to learn how to play jazz. Maybe they played like in their high school jazz band and they didn't improvise a lot, but that was always their dream. And then later on in their life, they're like, this is the thing I always wanted to do. So I had, just thought about like, maybe we could do this online where we make videos and then, answering different questions, teaching folks. It started out just me teaching at the piano. This is how you play all the things you are. This is how you play, this Herbie Hancock tune. And I would just demonstrate everything and slow things down the way I was playing them, the same way I would maybe do in a lesson, but just a recorded video. And I started, even before we had Open Studio, I had like Peter Martin online lessons. I just did it as a test to see, because I was traveling a lot, like touring a lot with different people in my own bands or whatever. And I'd meet a lot of younger pianists or just pianists in general, and they wanted to take a lesson, and we were always moving on to the next city. So I was always thinking of a way, I would email with some of them, I'd give them my email address and they'd ask me questions. I'm like, how can I pass along some of this information in a little bit more of a format that's scalable? You know what I mean?
Right.
So when I started that, the original lessons, it kind of took off way faster. Like it shocked me how quickly it took off. And I sort of stumbled into some somewhat sound business practices I realized later on in terms of like really having some specialized information that people valued and then kind of having access to them in some different ways that were totally by accident, no genius for me. But I did, kind of keep my ear to the ground and watch what was happening. And then once I saw the response, I was like, I think we're onto something. And I'm like, it's not just me that knows how to do this. I can call on my friends, that are great artists and great teachers. So we started just adding different artists, different instruments. And then in 2015, we created Open Studio, the idea being that the studio's open for everybody. And we didn't really include jazz in the title because I thought maybe we'd go beyond jazz, which we haven't done. We've like very much stayed within that niche because it's that my area of expertise. But we've grown to, over 6,000 members that are on either, monthly or annual memberships. It's a real community too. It's not just the lessons. We have live classes. We have, weekly like Zoom mentor sessions, we call them, where we have great artists like Aaron Parks and Diane Reeves and like legends of the music that do a live workshop. And it's a really cool thing. We got members in over 130 countries now, which is insane because I remember the first weekend when it was like 20 people signed up. My mother being one of them, I'm pretty sure. So it's grown, and I've learned a lot. I've been able to, really provide some interesting revenue streams to a number of great artists. In addition to recording, which, as we know, is kind of up and down, recording royalties and live performance. But like during the pandemic, a lot of our kind of operations really took off because people were, on lockdown or whatever. So it became a really important income source to a number of our artists, and I was able to expand out a bunch then. So, it We're a team of 12 here. We're based in St. Louis, Missouri. We have 3 of the team are outside. One of them's outside of the country. 2 of them are in New York. Everybody else is here in St. Louis. We've built our own studios. And I'm just really excited, extremely proud of what we built here and kind of what our community, and I've gotten a chance to meet a number of our members as I was at the Village Vanguard last week performing with Christian McBride, and a bunch of our Open Studio people came out that I've met before, which is super exciting to meet them in real life because most of our stuff is online. That's kind of what it is.
And how does one go about enrolling in this program, and is there any fees involved?
Yes, there's definitely fees. That's how I'm able to have the 12 staff and the whole thing. Although, like, you know, a good entry point. So we're at openstudiojazz.com. You can go there. We have monthly memberships, annual, and you can also just like buy one course to get started. Although most people are kind of coming in as members, like a subscription. It's not like a long-term commitment. You can just join for a month and you can leave at any time. Some people come and go. But a cool entry point that a lot of people come to us is through our YouTube channel, which is Open Studio Jazz as well. Just search Open Studio Jazz on YouTube, and we have a lot of our content up there available for free, of course, because it's on YouTube. And you can kind of sample. I think that's the place I encourage people to sample what we do and see if our style fits them. See if they're kind of. We have all different levels, but some people are like, "Am I good enough? I'm a beginner." Yes, we have beginner, we have advanced, we have a lot of stuff. But that's a good way to see our artists. To see, I'm doing a lot of the content. Adam Manis, who's my creative director, who's a great pianist, has a bunch of videos on there, and you can kind of go down that rabbit hole. And then what people generally do is, once they want to really kind of go next level and get serious about their playing, this is for, like, our program at Open Studio is really for people that are practicing, like, you know, why I like people to practice every day, but we say like 5 days a week. But it's really, we have a lot of really inspired kind of adult amateurs, but some of them are very much at the professional level in terms of their skills. But they're just looking, they maybe don't have access to a teacher where they live. They maybe don't have time to go to a teacher. They're looking for some inspiration on the weekend when they have a chance to practice, but they don't know what to practice. So a lot of our courses are really based around guiding them through the right stuff to practice to get better at playing jazz.
And this is really styled to where you can learn and practice at your own pace, I take it.
Yes, absolutely. That's sort of the foundation of what our pedagogy is, that no matter which level you're at, it's so like beginner, intermediate, advanced, and we have it even broken up within those as well, that the courses, the recorded courses, you can move through them, you know, as quickly or as take your time, depending on how much time you have to practice. Of course, you can pause, you know, and rewind, which is a big advantage over a live lesson. I remember I had wonderful piano teachers growing up because my parents were friends. They always got me teachers instead of teaching me. They taught me themselves too, some, but like once I got serious, they're like, we're going to get you a teacher. They had access to some really good teachers, and so I had great teachers. But I remember going in and tape recording the lesson because I wanted to get all that, you know, some of the stuff. Oh, I'm going to remember this, but then I'd forget it. So we've simplified some of that because you can rewind it. We have a system where you can slow the videos down, but the pitch stays the same, which is super important for learning jazz because talk about Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and these folks, like a lot of these lines are going by so quick they can seem unplayable, but once you can slow them down, you can really break them down and practice them. But if the pitch is changing, it won't help you. So I wished I'd had the platform and tools that I have growing up, because I was like pressing a cassette tape and play, dropping the needle. I mean, it was a mess to try to transcribe stuff off the record. So we've simplified a lot of that. And we also have an Open Studio Pro program that is kind of our most it's not really our most advanced. It's for our most dedicated people. We have live lessons 6 days a week. We have like 5 different instructors, different levels, and people meet over Zoom, and it's all in real time. And that's kind of our premium, most bespoke offering. And that's the folks that are really making a lot of progress. But they have time. I mean, some of these folks are like either retired or, I don't know, maybe they're independently wealthy. They're not working because they're watching they're at our classes during the day, which is amazing. It's kind of like, what would you do if you could just like have time? And these people are like, I've always wanted to play jazz. And so like they're all in, and they're some of our most beloved members. And it's a super exciting part of our program called Open Studio Pro.
Now, this goes beyond just piano. Other people, like I'm a bassist. This is something that would benefit me.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, well, we have piano is really our primary instrument and our most number of members, but we have guitar, we have acoustic bass, we have some electric bass. We kind of specialize in acoustic bass, but we have some really good electric bass players that go through the program and are thinking about switching or doing both. And then we have a little bit of saxophone, and we have an amazing course for more advanced alto and tenor saxophone from Steve Wilson. But like bass is great because we have Ron Carter. We have Ron Carter's only online video course. He's one of our artists. We have Bob DeBoo, who's in house with us, that does guided practice sessions. We have Christian McBride. He was one of my first artists, and so. Bass, we especially for acoustic bass is a super exciting area for us. But it's just like piano. There's just so many pianists that want to play jazz. Like that, we kind of started. We always focus on it because that's what I did at the beginning. But then, as we thought we were going to get into other things, and we have a little bit, the market is piano and guitar too, for sure. And then drums. We have some great drum courses, and we have a really cool drum program as well.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for a couple of our sponsors. But as we do, we're going to play another track from Peter's album. This one is called Gratitude in Motion. And when we come back, we're going to talk about this album.
You're listening to the business side of music.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here with Peter Martin, who is a jazz pianist, educator, entrepreneur. This gentleman wears a gazillion different hats. I'm just going to leave it at that, along with being a composer and an arranger. He has released an album through his studios. It's Peter Martin and Generation S. We've played a couple of the cuts off the album. Here's my first question, because I've never heard this terminology. What exactly, or who exactly, is Generation S?
Yeah, so the personnel, well, first of all, nobody's heard of it because it's a little bit of a made-up term, and that was by intention because I wanted people to kind of be like, what is this? I didn't want to make the typical, like, Peter Martin quartet, you know, like the jazz musicians always do, because to me, that's kind of like, ugh. I mean, like, if somebody really likes me and has been following me and likes my music, of course they're going to listen, but it's not exactly that interesting or exciting, I think. And so but I did want to have a quartet. I wanted 4 people. So I was like, well, it's not going to call it quartet. And I wasn't even going to use my name. But then we kind of realized it's like, well, people got to know like whose thing it is. And like, it is interesting if they know I'm doing it, I'm writing the music, whatever. But I had this idea for 4 musicians. It's Gregory Hutchinson on drums, Reuben Rogers on bass, Sarah Hanahan on saxophone, and myself on piano. I kind of had this vision a couple of years ago for this exact group because Reuben and Greg, the bassist and drummer, and myself have played together for like 30 plus years in different situations. I first met Greg when I was 17 years old when I first went to New York. He's one of the, became one of the top jazz drummers of our generation. Reuben, I met a few years later, same thing. I mean, we played with Joshua Redman, we played with Diane Reeves, made records, blah, blah, blah. I did a lot of things, and they played on a couple of my earlier trio records over the years. So we were kind of like a set rhythm section, even though we haven't been playing a lot over the last few years. But I always love coming back to them because it's like we know each other. We know each other's tendencies. We know how to play. We skip over a lot of introductions when we play together. We get right to the heart of the matter, which is fun. But Sarah Hanahan, who's much younger than us, hence the generation little spin on things. I mean, I believe she's 25, 26, younger than my oldest child, but a little older than my youngest. So she, that's where she's at. But she, I heard her in 2019 as part of the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program at the Kennedy Center, where I was teaching. Betty Carter started years ago, before she passed away, this program called Jazz Ahead, and then the Kennedy Center and Dr. Billy Taylor ended up moving it to the Kennedy Center years later and have continued it, and it's an amazing program. It basically brings together by audition like the top 20 to 30 young jazz players between the ages of like 20 and 23 or so. It's mostly like recent graduates of Juilliard and Berklee School of Music and like really, really great players. It's a super rigorous audition program to get into it. And then all the teachers are folks that had some connection with Betty Carter. So like I played with Betty Carter, Greg, and Reuben also played with Betty Carter when we were in our early 20s. So the idea is to keep that connection because Betty was an amazing teacher. She was a mentor to so many, to like 3 generations of jazz musicians, especially the rhythm section. Like she was great at like, she'd be singing and then she'd turn down, she'd give you signals what to do, what not to do, and just following her and learning from her was amazing. So it's like kind of a post-doc or pre-professional kind of program, this Jazz Ahead. And so anyway, I was teaching there, and Greg was there as well that year, and all the young players were amazing. But Sarah, I heard her for the first time there. Something about her playing, I was like, wow, she's got it, And I remember thinking like, I usually play trio, but I want to find a situation to be able to play with her. And I even started to have an idea about some of the music. So that planted the seed for what became Generation S. And then we kind of kept in touch. But I didn't really tell her about the idea of the band, and then the pandemic hit and everything, and I was still thinking about it. But basically, fast forward to early this year, and as Open Studio really took off, I still was thinking about this quartet. And I was like, I want to do this. I was like, it's crazy to try to make a record and do it the way I wanted to do it because it makes no business sense, but I just wanted to do it. I'm like, I got to do this. So I called up everybody, and it's super complicated because Greg Hutchinson, the drummer, lives in Rome, Italy. Sarah's in New York. Reuben lives in San Francisco, a Bay Area. I live in St. Louis. But I was like, I want to do it this year. And so I started trying to collate dates and everything. And we ended up doing, I wrote all the music in July and August. And then in September, I brought everybody into St. Louis to our studios here, which we had never recording an album here. It was never really intended to be a full-on audio studio. It was really because we do video, we do audio, of course, but we record a lot of our coursework here. It's very piano focused. We'd never done anything with an extended band, but the team was up for the challenge. So I was like, we're going to try to do this here. So just to add injury to insult, all new music. And then I decided we're going to record it live in one take. So I was like, well, what would it take for us to be able to do this? Because I'm like, we're jazz musicians. One of the advantages is we don't have to sit in the studio for 3 weeks to get a vibe and figure it. I was like, we've all done records in one day before. Like that's somewhat common with jazz and some of the greatest records ever. But I was like, a lot of times the first take is the best take. I was like, what if we sort of optimized for the first take? Like, what would we have to do to make it so we could, as close as possible, guarantee the first take would be album worthy? So we kind of worked back from that, and Adam Manis, my creative director, I asked him to produce it, so he put a lot of these things together. I wrote the music, and then what we did was we rehearsed for 2 days straight with the new band. Oh, the other thing is none of us had ever played with Sarah, so like 3 of us had played together, the old guys in their early 50s, and then Sarah's coming in, and she's got to play with us. She's got to play all this hard music I'm giving her, and she's young, so she doesn't have a huge amount of experience, although she does have some. So it was a little bit of a risky proposition, but I'm so excited the way it came out. Everybody rose to the occasion. In fact, I got so confident. I was like, not only are we going to record it live, I'm like, we're going to live stream this on YouTube just so that everyone can see it happening live. Because I know people are going to come back and be like, no, you didn't. How do we know you did it live? I'm like, you can watch it as we did it. So we did that, and it was fun. And we had to end up doing full video and audio at the same time, even though, of course, we're making an album, so we're optimizing for audio. But what you're hearing on the record is exactly what it took 1 hour to make this record.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, of course it took days and weeks of preparation and everything, but I mean, the actual recording of it was done. So I don't know. I love it. I love the record. I love the way they played. They added so much more. I wrote all the music. It's all new music. So it's also risky from that standpoint. There's no standards. There's no songs you've heard before. I do think if people are willing to kind of turn their ear in and approach it, it's an accessible record. It's not, I don't know. It's stuff that I love. You know, I wrote this record, like I wrote the music for it in a way that's different than anything I've ever done before, in that I really just I didn't redo anything because I thought it needed to be different than it just came out as I was writing it. So I spent a lot of time writing it, but I didn't tweak it for the listeners. I tweaked it for my own ears, and the players did the rest for me on the job, so to speak.
I love the concept that you went in and did this without second takes or editing in mind. You were just really emphasizing the whole live interactive between each other experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think a lot of people have said like, wow, that was such a risk. Why'd you do that? You didn't have to do that. But in a lot of ways, I look at the things that people find exciting about jazz. And I mean, obviously knowing that jazz is such a big term, and like it can be so, like you mentioned Weather Report, listening growing up, like I would definitely say that that's jazz, but some people are like, that's not real, you know, but that's so different than like Louis Armstrong or John Cole. Like it's such, but what is the thread that people get excited about when they hear all these different kinds of great jazz? And to me, that's the improvisation, the interaction between the musicians, the serendipity of what's going to happen at that. I mean, like if you go to see Taylor Swift, you want it to sound just like the record. You want her to be wearing some crazy clothes or whatever, costume change, but you want it. If she comes in and does all original songs, there's going to be a riot, you know what I mean? Whereas people come to a jazz show not wanting it to sound like the record, wanting to be surprised, wanting to have some active listening, I think. So I'm like, well, how can we best represent that? If you sit there doing take after take, it doesn't usually get better. It just gets more kind of refined and defined, but it loses some of that excitement. That's why some of the greatest jazz records are live records, like live at a club. You know, Miles Davis live at the Black Hawk, I think, is one of his greatest records. Like you can feel the vibe of the room. So what we did on this Generation S record is a little different because we didn't have an audience here. We had an audience on YouTube, folks all around the world watching it, but we didn't have an audience. So it was very much a studio record in one take. Because a lot of people are like, oh, you're not the first to do that. There's been live records. That's like, and I've played on 2 or 3 records live at the Village. I did Live at the Village Vanguard with Joshua Redman back in the 90s, and then we did a live record with Christian McBride. So I know what it is to do a live record in a club. That's really fun too, but that's typically they'll record for 6 days, and then you pick out the best takes of each tune, which is cool. That's a great way to do it as well.
I watched Vale Johnson, he's Kenny G's bassist, and he did a little jazz show here in Nashville. And Chester Thompson, who was, I believe, the drummer for Weather Report, he just came into the venue and sat down, and they said, well, what do you want to do? Just pick a song. And they picked a song, and it was a quartet. And Chester had never played with any of these guys, and it was so electrifying. It was so energizing to watch these 4 musicians feed off of each other as they were going through the song. Is that the same thing that you were experiencing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we even set up physically in the studio in a way to maximize that human interaction, to optimize for the musical product. You know what I mean? We faced each other, which was very difficult with the video and stuff, because normally you want to have the main camera where you can see everybody and they're looking. But we were all in a circle facing each other. But I'm playing piano, which is, of course, a big physical barrier, in the drums. But I mean, I wanted it to be, I felt the responsibility, because I'm asking a lot of the musicians. I'm like, play this new music. They're still reading it. We rehearsed it. They practiced it, but perform the music, but record it and make it feel like we've been playing together for a long time, which 3 of us had, but 1 of us hadn't. But so I wanted to optimize for that energy exchange between the musicians, because a lot of times we'll be in separate rooms in the studio for isolation, so that you can, I mean, in theory, you're getting better quality recording on each instrument if there's no bleed through. And then you have headphones on. I didn't want to have any headphones on. I wanted us right there so we could acoustically hear each other. So we had to solve, that's a whole nother episode on how we solved those issues. But I mean, the idea was the music comes first, and then we have to capture it at the highest level we can. And I think we nailed it on all fronts.
Before we let you go, once again, I know you mentioned it, but how can people get enrolled in your course, A, and then B, how can they go about finding your music?
Yeah, so Generation S is available on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all that. We have CDs, we have LPs, because I got interested in LPs again, and apparently a lot of people did. So we're excited about that. And you can go to petermartin.com for all that stuff. But you can also, the other thing that we have is a kind of fun way to consume this record is on YouTube, on the Peter Martin YouTube channel. We have music videos of each of the songs, and of course, because we did it live and in one take, it's the same performances and everything that you hear on the record. So you can watch us, and you'll see it'll say official video for each of the songs. We're releasing those kind of every couple of weeks. I think we have 4 or 5 of them up already. So that's a fun way if you want to kind of watch what we're doing, especially if you have some good speakers with your YouTube. That's the way I watch or listen to a lot of music now. But there's that. And then for Open Studio, go to openstudiojazz.com, and you can watch a free sample lesson. You can watch us on YouTube, like I said earlier. We're super, I think, friendly and able to, come in and, we really just want to sign up people that it's a good fit for them. So we give a lot of opportunity for, is this right for you kind of thing. This is not we're going to get you in there and take your money. We'll do that after we're sure you like it. And we find that people generally enjoy giving us their money because we're giving them a really fun experience with our community.
Peter, thank you so much for being on the show. Once again, you went down a couple rabbit holes that I absolutely love traveling with you there. So thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. I enjoyed the discussion, Bob, man. Thank you for having me.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.